The motion before the House for the first semi-final debate is as follows. Mainstream media organizations should not provide a platform, example, by inviting to debates or doing interviews, to people whose views are widely criticized for being racist or otherwise exclusionary. Speaking on proposition, we have Sejal Nirmal from Amber International School, and speaking on opposition, we have Arvind Iyengar from Bombay Scottish Pavai.
Good morning, everyone. Studies suggest that hate and racist content in the media is prevalent and growing. And indeed, this is true. After all, who can forget the British tabloids' wild accusations against Meghan Markle, or the special segment that Fox News ran, the O'Reilly factor, that Bill O'Reilly, the show's host, called gentle fun. It was so relentlessly odious and flagrantly racist. This is the latest scoop from Chinatown, was a 5-minute video and was so full of wince-inducing stereotypes, and this isn't the first time Jesse Waters, a Fox News reporter, targeted minority communities. Back in April, he visited Harleen to investigate the reasons for Hillary Clinton's success among black voters, where again, his comments were racist and sexist. I wonder how it can be that the fastest growing racial community in America, one that has doubled its share of the electorate in the past decade, is subjected to such crass caricature on national television. This cycle won't end until people like Jesse Waters enjoy screen time. In recent times, a popular reality show in India had used a racist rhetoric against a young participant from Guwahati. This is shameful and totally unacceptable. Sadly, no action was taken against him, and when we let such incidents slide under the carpet, we are normalizing this attitude. Freedom of expression is a right, but no one has a right to make fun of anyone's culture, race, or religion. You cannot exercise your right when you are also subverting someone else's. News and media are people's primary source to information, and people usually form opinions based on what they see, and if what the media shows them is bigotry, misogyny, and hate speeches, what exactly will be the state of our society? And we must keep in mind that young and impressionable minds also consume such media, and we will be then directly influencing them. Calling people with such extreme views on such mainstream platforms can make the unaware and uneducated people fall for these seemingly great and revolutionary ideologies. I think we shouldn't allow people with such unhealthy views a stage where their ideas can be projected onto a much more vulnerable audience. Thank you.
If the freedom of speech is taken, then dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep to slaughter. Media organizations should not provide a platform for people whose views are widely criticized to be racist or exclusionary. I'm sorry, racism and sectarianism is a blight on the human conscience, but this sounds like a vague excuse behind which repressive governments hide their two-faced totalitarian policies. What counts as racist and exclusionary? Who decides it, and how do we know that it's unbiased? Let's start at the beginning. Mainstream media is a term used to refer to all mass news media that both reflect and shape prevailing currents of thought. By manipulating this vital aspect of society, governments can essentially put horse-like blinders on the public, keeping them oblivious from the harsh reality. I will be presenting 3 arguments against the control checks on mainstream media in my speech. Firstly, freedom of speech is the bedrock of a liberal and free society, and believe it or not, freedom of speech includes the freedom to offend. I may not like what you have to say, but that does not strip you the right to say it. The right to freedom of speech is a fundamental right, and if you believe in it, you believe in freedom of speech for views you don't like. Every dictator, every tyrant, every oppressor was in favor of the views he liked. The defense of free speech begins at the point when people say something you can't stand. And then if you can't defend your right to say it, it is intolerance at its worst. Secondly, who decides the precise definition of racist and exclusionary? With 7 billion diverse people on this planet, every statement, policy, or action is bound to offend at least thousands somewhere. Neither does that exemplify the public opinion regarding it, nor does it justify its ethicality. And the privilege to decide what works and what doesn't can be misused on a multitude of levels. Governments can use it to shut down public opinions or the views of the opposition. It can be used to suppress and discriminate against ethnic minorities, or can be used by minorities to target and antagonize the majorities. It will be the decisive death of neutral and non-aligned journalism. And the proposition mentioned how it influences society and how this negative media will influence the impressionable minds. Just by cutting down one medium of this toxicity does not eliminate the hate which is there in society. The haters and the racists will find another way to put their word forward in society. They are relentless. Lastly, although I vehemently oppose the proposition, I see where it is coming from. I mean, in a world where the President of the United States can publicly refer to Mexicans as rapists, you've got to know there's something wrong. It is true, we are surrounded by racial bigotry, communal hatred, and blatant discrimination. But does shunning all of it out into oblivion make it disappear? After all, how many can you silence? And does it still make a difference? The hatred will still be poisoning us through our air and surroundings, if not through the television. However, if like every problem we try to concentrate on the causes instead of snubbing the symptoms by mending hostile relations, educating the public, and propagating universal emphasis on universal brotherhood, then we still have a chance at making this world a better place. Thank you.
When a particular community which was targeted on the news channels or any other media platform by a particular leader or a speaker, and that community itself demands that that their culture was made fun of, it was violated, and that they want the speaker to not be given opportunities, or someone who represents their own community and he or she is making racist or wrong remarks, and they don't want that person representing them, will that be wrong? Will cutting that person off from media be wrong?
So what is the aim here? Is it to just hide the racism away behind curtains, or is it to actually mitigate it? Because if you just remove that person off air, it does not change that person's perspective about that community, and it does not change any way, it does not reduce or change the hate. That person will go on to another news channel and propagate even worse views about the community. So just by shutting them out from one source is not going to make a difference. We need to make change in the community. So as you said that you need to regulate the people who are there on air, who are racist and exclusionary. I'm assuming you will have an unbiased body or a committee to decide this, because there's of course no short way of deciding. And if you're going to have a committee, how do you ensure that it is not corrupt, it is not being influenced by any political parties or any other government body or any body of power? How do you ensure that it's completely a short way of mitigating the racism which you see on media?
Here, I'll also want to ask you, how do you make sure that the people making these comments are also not motivated by some other political factor or any other factor? And again, when making these communities, we can also ensure that all the communities are proportionately represented. And also, I believe that the general, our society is the judge. We have many platforms, social media, Twitter, we have Instagram, we have many platforms where people can express their views. The audience itself is the judge. A community which is, the committee which is racially diverse, I believe that is enough.
So you do know that lobbying, in political lobbying, is $1 million exchange of favors and demands, and it does not matter which race. Even, for example, an Afro-American citizen could be supporting just for money, could be against his own people just for money. Lobbying is $1 million business. And how do you still ensure that by representation and by social media, where nothing is as it seems, how can you actually make any difference through that? And if you are dealing with this on a global level, because I'm assuming what we see is global news due to globalization, how will you ensure this kind of standards on a global level? Because the standard of offensive may vary. Women's rights in Saudi Arabia is offensive, but in America it's not. So how will you maintain that standard? And
I understand that political lobbying is a very big issue, but so is that people come on news channels and make comments, very derogatory comments against women. And in in the politics, our elections are a political drama, and there are so many intolerable comments made by a lot of politicians. And again, this one could have been politically motivated, right? So here I also want to say that again it's and again it's the society, and I understand that social media, nothing is as it seems, but it also is a platform where people can put out their opinions. And at the end of the day, there will be no higher body which can judge. There is no one who can absolutely say that this is right and this is wrong. But when we give people a chance to come out on media channels and say this, we in a way legitimize that. So many times we've seen Indian media itself is so biased. Some media channels will support the right wing, some will support the left wing. How do you make sure that you have a balanced, unbiased news? And when you let people like these, people who make such comments onto the stage, you again are doing the wrong thing, I believe. People are very influenced by what they see on news. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So the issue that we see in media nowadays, especially when you call people for a discussion, is a discussion at least has a certain amount of scope for them to argue back and forth about their views, and there's a possibility of you reaching a middle ground. However, when you refuse to invite them onto any platform, they'll be like, there is no point convincing XYZ person, or there's no point convincing this section of the population that my views are reasonable. And because of this thinking, they go towards the most extreme scenario that they ever can. So how would you prevent, if media is not allowed to invite these people, how would you prevent these people from moving to the far extreme is my question.
Well, also we can see that in many cases, if someone comes onto television and he or she propagates hate or instigates hate, and this can lead to riots in the worst cases, this is also another problem. And yes, I understand that maybe cutting off people completely won't be the solution. A justified debate would be the solution, I believe, where both sides can present their views in a controlled and where without a biased judge. This will be perhaps a more acceptable solution to your question.
Like, what do you think the media thinks about, or what are the reasonings that the media, like what is just some of the reasons or a checklist that the media probably has before deciding whether or not someone or something should get on their platform, like just in general?
Well, I'm pretty sure they check the person's popularity, his relevance to the content, and the general acceptance of the society of the person. Also, this I believe that they should also make sure that this person has prior to this not made a comment, and even if he or she has made a comment, I believe they can be given second chances. But if he or she makes a comment like that on national television, they should be rebuked just there and there, or the media channels also themselves should then actually apologize perhaps to the viewers for what happened, and that they should also make sure that the viewers know that this was a racist comment and this is wrong. You can't just throw it under the rug and be like, this is something normal. You have to acknowledge that these comments were made. I think that is what they could do.
My question is for you, Arvind. So I would argue that a lot of mainstream media organizations, the incentive to platform people who may be saying offensive and otherwise controversial things is also that it sells, that it is popular, people talk about it, it creates conversation, people watch it, and it's not really because they love free speech, it's also because of what sells, and that's why they end up spending more and more time on that rather than covering other things. So do you think, A, that is fair, and do you think then that maybe questions your free speech argument a little, and what is the incentive behind platforming these people? That's the first part. And the second part of my question is, if you have, say, a Netflix comedy special where a comedian makes a transphobic comment. Now, the point of a comedy special is entertainment, right? It's not to educate or debate or raise awareness. It's mostly entertainment. So when someone is supposed to laugh at something like that, which is obviously targeting a community, do you think that is okay?
So it is, of course, a fact. We see it all around the world that controversial sells. So many politicians, they do questionable stuff just to catch attention. But over here, since this entire aim is to change the perception of media and how media gives the news or the content to the. So instead of having a committee which decides what's right and wrong, we should have a committee. We should propagate this positive reinforcement. Now, the media channels, the various ones which have, the government has a certain amount of control about the content which goes on air. It should not be questionable, and they do have a certain amount of control. So the government should exercise that control, and they should insist that there is positive reinforcement. And when controversial topics tend to come up, which they inevitably will, they should be shown in a negative light. Like racism should be shown in a negative light, not in a positive, humorous light. And to answer your second question, as I said in my speech, there isn't any definite line between insensitivity and humor. And I think like Netflix in this case, a comedy special, Netflix should take the responsibility to play it safe, to ensure that nothing on the borderline or even near the borderline should go on air.
If you would now allow the judges a few moments to deliberate and come back with results.
Only one person can go through the zone finals, and that person from this debate is the speaker against the motion, Arvind. Congratulations.